Hello everybody, welcome to part one of a little mini series that I'm starting on stamping mandalas. So stay tuned and we will stamp the first mandala. All right guys, this is the first mandala that I'm going to show you. Let's see, it's trying to focus on my face instead of the thing here. Hello, there's my face. So this is the first one that I'm going to be showing you, and it's more of a structured mandala instead of a freeform. And then the next video will be about a more freeform mandala. So this one, I was really exact in how I made it. I was really careful about my placement and my choice of stamps and things like that. So I'll show you that over at my workbench. And anyway, then we'll just talk about it some more after I give you a little demonstration. All right, so I am starting out with a 1 1/4 inch blank, just a round blank of aluminum in 1100. And I am using what's called polar graph paper to get some really defined lines onto the blank. So I'm just lining up, this is just an old bracelet blank that I have, and I'm using it as a straight edge to line up the lines that you see on the graph paper here onto my blank once I have it centered on that paper. And you can actually just Google these. You can just Google whatever it was I just called it, polar graph paper, P-O-L-A-R graph, and it's just graph paper for, you know, circular graphs instead of a grid. And then once you have all of your lines that you want drawn onto your blank, I just went ahead and used a 7/8 of an inch blank and tried to center it on my blank that had the lines on it, and then traced around it. And that's going to give me an interior line to follow so I can get a visual idea of where my stamps are lining up, in addition to the lines that are going through the center of the blank. And then I'm doing the same thing again with a 1/2 inch blank to make a smaller circle right at the center. So right in the center there, I'm using a 2.7, I think, millimeter punch, the crystal setter punches from Beaducation. And so I'm just starting in the center on this one just to go with the theme of mandala. And I accidentally cut it out, but I went ahead and started with that crystal punch in the very center, and then I'm working from the center out. So with this fan design stamp, I took the pointed bottom of the fan and set it right at the center next to the dot that I made for the crystal. And then I'm just kind of rolling it outward, and I'm using that and looking from behind to make sure that I'm getting it lined up, and then the center of the top part of the fan I'm making sure meets that center line that's pointing at me. Hopefully I'm making sense. I've never narrated anything before. So the next stamp that I wanted to use, it took me a while to pick it, but I went ahead and went with a smaller feather. And I'll leave the links to all of these below in the description. So here's the little feather, and I decided to go between the fans. So I put it about halfway down so that the, I guess, stem of the feather kind of came down in between the fan. And then just visually, I made sure I was going halfway between the lines that radiate out from the center, and then that the tip of the feather never made it quite out to the edge of the blank. So then I'm using this tiny little arrow here. That one I think I got from Supply Guy on Etsy. And I decided to go ahead and put that one below the feather in between the fans to kind of fill in that space there. So, of course, since we are moving metal here and displacing it, you know, the piece is going to start bowing up. So I went ahead and used my nylon mallet to flatten it back out there. And then this one is a little filigree crown kind of deal that I decided to go ahead and do right above, excuse me, each one of the fans there. So I made sure that the line coming from the center of the blank is going just right down the middle of that, so that it meets down in the center. I don't know if that made any sense, but so now this musical note I'm going to put on both sides of that little filigree. So in between the filigree and the feather. So I'm going just to the side of the line there instead of on the line. And that way I know that I've got just the right amount of space to not crash into the feather or that filigree. And I'm going to do that on both sides of the little filigree. So I'm going in one direction and then I'm coming back around and going on the other side there. The next one, this is a compass rose, and this is also from the supply guy. And I just wanted to use the bottom half of it. So what I'm doing here is I'm lining up the, I guess the east and west points along the outer edge of the blank, and then kind of rolling it in. And then that bottom, so I guess the south, I'm trying to show you here a little bit more closely what I'm doing, but the southern point will rest against that line that I made with the 7/8 inch blank. So I'm just doing that all the way around in between the feathers and on both sides of the filigree there. But you'll see there's still a little bit of blank space on either side of the feather. So I'm using this heart from Beaducation to just use the lower pointed part of the heart to kind of match the feel of that compass rose to fill in those places. So it gave me a nice little point. One of the important things with doing a mandala is that you've got to kind of think outside of the box as far as filling in spaces or what kind of shapes you can use. So since I wanted to match that triangular shape of the compass rose, I used the bottom half of a heart. So that was a way that I needed to get creative to kind of fill that in and work with the stamps that I had. So then it's just time to blacken it, and I'm using just a Sharpie. For a lot of the projects that I do like to use a Sharpie oil-based paint pen. But for the mandalas, I really do like to use just a regular Sharpie, and then I can come through with steel wool to remove the extra ink. And that way I get a nice sort of satin finish on here. And I just really prefer that with the mandalas instead of using like rubbing alcohol and getting a polished finish, or instead of a pro polish pad or something like that. I'm just being kind of careful to make sure that I don't put any ink inside of the divot that I made for the crystal, because I really want the glue to adhere to the metal. And I don't know if it would be a problem to have some ink in between the two, but I just figure the cleaner that area can be, the better, to get a really good bond between the crystal and the metal with the glue. So now I'm just going through with my steel wool, and I'm always making sure that I'm just rubbing it in the same direction. So you'll see I just turned it 180 degrees there, and I'm rubbing it back and forth just to make sure that all of the lines from buffing it with that, let's see, 40 something aught, I don't remember what to call it, but anyway, with that super fine steel wool, that way I get a really nice even satin look instead of it looking kind of like scribbles. So this is one of the best tips that I have for you. I put a little magnet inside of a plastic bag after I use steel wool, and then I can just suck up the little shavings of steel wool that get everywhere, and then I can take the magnet out of the bag and all of the shavings just fall away into the garbage. So That's one of my best tricks. So this is the 2.7, I think, millimeter. I can never remember the exact number, but the 2 point something or other millimeter Swarovski crystals from Beaducation. They're a size SS9 if you decide to look around. And this is like the katana deals that they have on Beaducation, but here, look at it, it just disappeared into the end. Oh my goodness. What the heck? Yeah, so that was a cheap one off of Amazon, which is great. It's just, I pushed too hard and it died. So it's not a high-end tool, but it does the trick. So my favorite glue for setting these crystals is the Gorilla Gel Super Glue. You use the tiniest little pinprick of glue on here. So I'm just going to show you a close-up of how little glue you need to use. You see that tiny little dot in the center there? If you use any more than that, your glue is going to ooze out all over the place when you put pressure on it with the crystal. So I'm just using my needle nose tweezers there, technical term, I don't know what they're called. And I'm using it to set it in, and then I use the side of the tweezers to kind of press that crystal in for about 15 seconds. And it is not coming out of there. I've never had luck with Hypo Cement or E6000. Gorilla Glue is my guy. Okay, so you can see that I am not the best at perfection. So, I mean, I don't know. Come on, focus, little fella. There we go. So, I was really careful to make sure that I followed my grids and everything. And so it gave me a really good, you know, pretty exact mandala. I can't think of words. So, but if you want to see some really perfect stamping for a really structured mandala, check out Brass Stamper on Instagram. Holy cow, amazing. He does, I think it's a he. So the stamping that Brass Stamper does is perfection. I cannot even imagine how that level of perfection is achieved for stamping. And anyway, so I would check that out. He uses a lot of the same stamps that I do. I'm gonna feel really stupid if this is actually a woman. So Brass Stamper, let me know. And then next video, I'm going to show you, whoop, dropping things, this one. And this one is more of a free form instead of a more structured. So stay tuned for the next video, and I'm gonna show you how I did that one more in a freeform style. I'm not gonna do a ton of mandalas, so maybe these two, maybe more, we'll see. So very mini series. If you stamp mandalas yourself, let me know in the comments what kind of style you prefer. Do you prefer to do more of a free form, or do you prefer more of a structured style? And I'm gonna go ahead and be listing this necklace that I made from the mandala that we stamped in this video in my Etsy shop. That's the Ginger Snap Cottage. And I'll leave a link in the description below, as well as links for the stamps that I used and the blanks that I used. So hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for joining me again, and I will see you next time.